Hi, this is Eric Sparks with OldFutures.com. Today I have a list of the best or essential space movies of the 1960s. Now, I'm going to start off and say I'm not going to include Planet of the Apes. Just like the first couple minutes are in space, the rest is not. So, I'm going to rule that one out right off. And then I'm going to start off with a special mention of another movie that considerably more takes place, at least on another planet, but it's less than a third of the film. It is the 1969 adaptation of Ray Bradbury's short story collection, The Illustrated Man, by director Jack Smite. Very, very well done. There's a short story called The Long Rain, which I believe the original short story takes place on Venus. This part of the film, they don't really say where it is, but very, very good adaptation of that short story. And if you've never seen it, check out the film, especially check out that section. On to the list. I'm going to start with a kind of low budget, interesting sci-fi movie called The Phantom Planet from 1961. Sort of a interesting story of how this planetoid starts drawing spaceships out of their normal orbits, and they can't figure out what's going on, so they send this ship out to investigate. The ship gets drawn down to the planet, it lands. As soon as the astronaut starts breathing the atmosphere down there, he starts shrinking, and he shrinks down to just a couple inches tall, which is the same as all of the other people on that planet. He ends up getting embroiled in this conflict between the people of that planetoid, who look basically like humans, and then these other creatures called the Solarites, who are these weird aliens who keep attacking them. And fairly low budget. Some moments are genuinely interesting. Some moments are a little cheesy, but it was overall a lot of fun. They've released a colorized version, which I'm actually kind of interested to see, because I haven't seen that yet, but the black and white version was very cool. The sets ended up being used for various other things. The cockpit of the spaceship. I know it showed up in The Outer Limits. It might have been reused from Men into Space, though I'm not 100% sure, but it really looks like the same set. Next, the 1968 Barbarella with Jane Fonda by Roger Vadim. I watched this maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, something like that, and I was expecting just absolute cheesiness, campiness. I expected it to be fairly ridiculous. The movie took itself a lot more seriously than I expected. It actually ended up being very interesting. It was kind of... the feel was almost like Flash Gordon-ish, but with a touch of acid in there. It was just very strange, much stranger than I would have thought it would be, but much better than I thought it would be. I'm not going to say it's a great science fiction film in the 1960s, but it was a lot more interesting than I would have given it credit for. If you've never seen it, give it a watch. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. You probably won't love it, but I think you'll be surprised at how interesting it really is. Next is an Italian film from 1965 by director Mario Bava. It was sort of an Italian and French co-production. When it came over here, the voices were overdubbed. They're kind of cheesy. Anyway, the movie is called Planet of the Vampires, which sounds really cheesy and stupid, and why is this possibly on this list? This is mainly on this list because despite having a very, very low budget, the film looks fantastic. I mean, the sets are obviously sets, but he finds a way to photograph these in such an interesting and fantastic way. And the mood that he creates throughout the whole film is just palpable and, really kind of creepy and eerie. And I think it really succeeds more than it had any right to do. And if you haven't seen that, check it out. It is a very fun film. Next on my list, we're going behind the Iron Curtain. This was a Soviet film from 1962. There was a director named Pavel Klushantsev. I hope I said that right. And he actually made quite a few science fiction films. He was very influential in special effects. I've heard that he greatly influenced, Stanley Kubrick and those who came after. Whether that's true, obviously I can't ask Kubrick, so I don't know. But this film was called Planeta Bor, which translates to Planet of Storms. And I originally saw it on one of those, 20 sci-fi movies for $10 collections. And, it was fairly cheesy, but eventually I noticed that there were some sections that were really very good and, had a lot of time spent on them, a lot of money, special effects, and there were some sections that were just cheesy and kind of stupid. I was like, what is the deal here? And eventually I looked it up and found that it was originally a Russian science fiction film, and it was brought over here and they shot other parts of it. They shot these two other people and changed the story all around, overdubbed everything, and completely changed it. And the sections I didn't like were the sections that were shot after the fact and edited into the film. When I finally got a chance to go back and watch the original film, I thought it was pretty fantastic. Very, very well done, interesting special effects. He created, a look at Venus that, was very prehistoric. Vast oceans with monsters underneath, vanished cultures, alien cultures, dinosaurs running around, volcanoes going off, these explorers going across the planet on like floating cars, and they've got this big robot named John who goes around and is all useful in getting them out of jams, and it was really a lot of fun. I honestly don't understand why they didn't simply overdub it as is rather than shooting all of this other stuff that really drug the end result down. I think they should have just released it as is, dubbed some new voices, and there you go. Very interesting film. I think I watched it on YouTube. If you haven't seen it, give it a watch. I think there's even a DVD of the original film available now. Okay, next, on to another film from behind the Iron Curtain. This is the 1960 The Silent Star by Kurt Maitzig. This film was another one that I first watched on one of those bargain basement sci-fi collections. In fact, the print was so bad, the first time I saw it, I didn't even realize the film was in color. I mean, the colors were almost completely gone from the print. It was so bad, and it was so blurry, and you could hardly even see what was going on. And the first time I watched it, I, just had this preconception that this must be crap. Just enjoyed it for what I thought it was. Well, I ended up watching it again, and really started to notice that, wow, there were some really interesting sets in here. There was a lot of money spent on this. So I looked it up and found that it was a East German science fiction film. It was brought over here and some things were censored out of it, and it was overdubbed and released as the first spaceship on Venus, which is how I saw it. And I was very curious as to what this film originally looked like, and I found some pictures online. Looked really, really cool. So I ended up getting a copy. The DEFA, D-E-F-A, was the studio. They released a collection of their 3 science fiction films that they released over the course of the studio's life. And that was one of them. And it was, a very nice widescreen color print. It was a little soft, but it's a 1960 movie. And I was just blown away with how good it looked, how great the colors were. It just absolutely looked fantastic. Ever since then, I've really thought it was just one of the best science fiction films of the 1960s. And, I've shown it to as many people as I can because it's so cool and yet, almost completely unknown except in its, cut up first spaceship on Venus form. So you definitely need to check that one out. I don't know if the DVD that I got is still in print or not, but track it down, watch it. It's pretty fantastic. Next, Robinson Crusoe on Mars, 1964. Byron Haskin was the director. Now, this film has some absolutely fantastic special effects from a director who really knows how to handle science fiction. Byron Haskin, he directed War of the Worlds, which was a huge movie, classic. So in 1964, he directs an adaptation of Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe, but places the character on Mars. Adam West has a bit part in the very beginning, and the main character just ends up crash landed on Mars, has to find a way to breathe the thin air, get more oxygen, has to find food, has to figure out how to survive, which is interesting because I just saw The Martian with Matt Damon by Ridley Scott, and in a way this is very much The Martian but from the 1960s. But really a fantastic film. Criterion even ended up releasing a version of it. Definitely worth a watch. If you haven't seen that one, it is a fantastic film. We get to number 1, and this really should come as no surprise to anybody who is a fan of science fiction, but 2001: A Space Odyssey by director Stanley Kubrick. It's pretty much a given. I mean, I think it's one of the greatest films of all time. Certainly one of the greatest science fiction films of all time. The special effects were just absolutely light years beyond anything that had ever been seen before. And honestly, were beyond anything that would be seen again until the very first Star Wars movie. But, I mean, it elevated film into the realm of art in a way that nothing else ever had. And yet it still appealed to such a wide spectrum of people. It's just absolutely one of the greatest films of all time. Well, that's my list. Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? Would you change the order? Are there films that I didn't include that you would have? Are there films that you think, oh, that has no reason of being on that list at all? Let me know. I'd love to hear back from you. Do you have a different list? Let me know what your list is. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate your time. I'm Eric Sparks from Old Futures.